Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Everything's running?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. Thanks for tuning into this episode. This is the second time I've interviewed Matt Cox,
Yep.
my podcast producer, and we've kind of entered into a interesting season here over the last 3 months. We had to make some changes to our podcast schedule, and then Matt's family moved about 2 hours away, and that's been about, 3 months ago now? Close to it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. It's gone by that fast. But yeah, that was September.
So it kind of got us out of our normal rhythm. So we've been a little slow on getting episodes out. And as we find our new rhythm, I think we'll start getting back into getting back out to where we're trying to put at least 3 episodes out a month, probably is what I'm shooting for.
Yeah.
We were doing one a week pretty consistently for almost 4 years now, man.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
That's wild. It's gone by that quick.
4 years. Yeah, hard to believe. So I thought one thing we want as we're ending 2024 and moving into 2025, we just want to say thanks to everybody who has supported Spirituality Adventures, either through listening, subscribing, sharing. We've got over 2,800 subscribers now on all our different platforms. This year alone, we had over 70, or is the 70,000 downloads, is that this year or is that total?
So that's in the last like 12 months span. So in a year's time.
In a year span, we had over 70,000 downloads on
Yep.
all our different platforms. And and so we've done events as well where we've had a few hundred people show up at events, meditation events, that kind of thing. And then I'm getting out a memoir as well, working with an editor. I'm hoping to get that out next year. So we've been doing this 4 years together. We've got 216 podcast episodes out, Matt. It's interesting because I've talked to podcasters who were all gung-ho about starting a podcast, and they got 10 episodes out, realized how hard it was to keep it going, and then they just quit.
Right.
So we haven't quit. We're still going.
Still running strong.
216 episodes. And I thought we'd kind of do a little reminiscing about like our top episodes, and then some of our personal favorites that we've done, and then kind of look into next year, 2025. And by the way, for those of you who don't know Matt, he is the founder of Harbor Media Productions. And he does, I'm going to let him describe everything that he does, but he's an incredible videographer. He can do great advertisements. He can do movies. He can do documentaries. He's a photographer, musician, artist. I call him a Renaissance man, plus a father of 7 and married. So I don't know how he does it.
Yeah.
I would be mentally insane if I tried to do everything that he does. But he keeps it all together, man. So thanks, Matt, for all the work that you've done for Spirituality Adventures. I love working with you.
Same here.
So let's talk about, first of all, our top YouTube episodes. Number 1, Brian McLaren.
Yeah.
And not my most recent one with Brian, because my most recent one was called Life After Doom.
Yeah.
Which is this new book.
Right.
That's a hard one to get up there on the sales category, right? No, but an episode I recorded with him 2 years ago has had it's getting over 9,000 views. It's still growing.
Yeah, no, it's steadily, like, I think the last time we looked at it, it just hit 7,000. So, I mean, it just keeps going.
2,000 more. And it was, I think the title of it was, Why Should I Stay Christian or something like that?
Yeah.
And I interviewed him on 2 of his books, Faith After Doubt and Why Should I Stay Christian, which is an interesting book to read, because it's like taking Christianity through the 12 steps, is what I call it. And that was amazing interview, and I'm grateful for Brian. He's been a great resource for me in the last 3 years after everything I've gone through. It's been a super big encourager. The second biggest one that we had was one on me. I said it was What Happened to Fred Part 1. And we've had a few thousand views on that one.
Yeah.
And that was when I first came out. So when I had my meltdown at the end of 18 into 2019, and then 2019 was my worst year on record. I really didn't care if I lived or died. It was really a dark year for me. But then when I finally came out and started doing Spirituality Adventures and started putting stuff out, I just basically updated what happened to Fred Part 1, what happened to Fred Part 2.
Yeah.
What happened to Fred, I can't remember if we did 3 parts, 4 parts.
I think there were 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that one was a big one. And then the third biggest one, this is YouTube, was with Jessica Harp.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that was early on, too. That was a pretty early episode.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know Jessica, she grew up here in Kansas City, went to Oak Park. Her and her family attended the church that I pastored at Vineyard. And she and Michelle Branch, who was a pop star in the 90s, ended up doing a country band together called the Wreckers. They put out an album, had several big hits, and were nominated for a Grammy. And then Jessica got married, had family, and all this kind of stuff. And but I ended up doing like one of her first interviews after she had been silent for quite a long time.
Well, she said too, because you did an event not long after that either,
and she played
the event. She's like, it's been a bit since I performed. Yep. She did awesome too.
Yeah, we did that event out at Children's Mercy Park, and she was the main worship act. She did an amazing job, and she's gotten a new band together now, and she's playing at the Record Bar here in Kansas City with her new band. So be sure and check Jessica out. I'm gonna have to get her back on here and get an update on what she's doing.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Cool. And then the top one's on the audio podcast. So that's like just the audio side on whether you listen to Spotify or Apple or any of those things. The number one there on the audio side was with Tripp Fuller. Mm-hmm. Tripp runs the largest, probably one of the largest theological podcasts in America called Homebrewed Christianity. He's an advocate for what we call relational open process theology. And he and Tom Ward did a book together that I highly recommend called God After Deconstruction. Mm-hmm. They actually surveyed tens of thousands of people across America and came up with a list of about 8 reasons why people leave the faith or leave the church. And it's things like science, things like being hurt, church abuse issues, things like LGBTQ plus issues where people were hurt and wounded by the church because of that. It's things like, I'm thinking like other faiths. How do we respond to that? And basically him and Tom are trying to show how there are other versions of God that are truly loving and kind. And this is the God we want to press into. I kind of like to say, I've picked this up from Tripp, but there's like, some gods need to die. There's some ideas out there about God that kind of turn God into a monster, honestly. And so I would highly recommend that one. Matt, when he started with me, he recommended a gal named Faith Harper.
Yeah.
Talk about Faith. She was our second highest download on the audio side.
The therapist I was seeing at the time recommended that I read a book. Can I say the book's title?
If you want to. Put your fingers in your ears if you got kids listening.
Yeah, if you got somebody listening, you don't want to hear a curse word. The book was titled Unfuck Your Brain. And it was about dealing and like cognitive behavioral therapy and dealing with like depression and anxiety and stuff like that. And I went and bought the book and I read it really quickly. And I remember telling you about it. I was like, this book is amazing. Like, I really love it. And it's funny. And like, that's what sucked me in, was the way that it was written. It was like humorous and I enjoyed reading it. It wasn't just this like, try this, do that. Like, it was a lot of humor and like just it was cool how it was put together. Yeah,
a lot of F-bombs.
Yeah, a lot of F-bombs.
But she's a PhD. And
she's amazing.
Amazing, great therapist. So don't let the title chase you away.
She is incredible, and she knows her stuff. She's been doing this for a while. I reached out to her on Instagram, and I was like, I know this is a long shot. I just got your book. I produce a podcast. Can you please come on and do an episode? And she responded like later that day and was like, yeah, I'd love to. Let me know when. Like, that sounds fun. And it was like late 2020 or early 2021 when we reached out to her. And she's like, because of COVID, I haven't had a whole lot going on right now, but I'm actually writing another book. She was working on our kids. She made a kids version of that book that was like dealing with like childhood trauma and stuff like that. But she reached out like instantly and was like, I'd love to. And that was a great. That was a really good one. She's awesome. Definitely check out the book.
Yeah.
It's good.
The third highest audio download was Andrew Potter, and so as far as Kansas City people go, Andrew is the founder of ROKC, which is a indoor rock climbing community in Kansas City. They have a location in North Kansas City. They have locations in the Caves, and then they have a location down in Olathe. And so anybody in Kansas City that knows anything about rock climbing, if you've heard of ROKC or been to ROKC, Andrew and his brother are the founders of that. Andrew's a former Army Ranger and has gone through a lot of issues with PTSD. And he and his family attended my church when I pastored Vineyard Church. And so we did an interview with Andrew and talked about mental health.
Yeah.
And how he got ROKC started, and that was a pretty big issue as well.
That was a really good episode.
We actually ended up doing a event with Andrew, and remember we did an event on processing trauma, and we had Calvin Arsenia.
Yeah.
We had Andrew Potter. We had another gal that did a podcast. I forgot. It was Schisler. I'm blanking on.
Was
her name now.
the podcast with like, it was either her like best friend or her sister or something like that?
Yeah, and they did a podcast that I was on. On it was something about perfectionism.
Yeah, but
how none of us are perfect, and so they interviewed me because I was a fallen megachurch pastor, right? And but it fit well with their whole theme because what they were trying to do was debunk the idea that any of us are perfect or that any of us can ever attain to perfection.
Yeah.
So that was a good one. Tell me what some of your favorites have been, because we put out 216 episodes. Yeah. It's hard to remember them all. What have been some of your favorite ones, Matt?
I think some of my favorite ones, I've had a lot of like musician friends and just friends in general that you've had on here, and I think the ones that stood out to me the most were where my friends got to come in here and talk about like getting sober and like doing better and working on their lives and stuff. Like sitting over there and listening to Dutch or Mario, whatever you want to call him, talk about like his sobriety and getting his life together and everything. Like, I have been rooting for that dude for a long time, and he went through pardon my French, he went through some shit.
Right.
And similar, like all of his close friends were like, I don't know if this dude's gonna make it. Like, he just like, it got dark. And so sit here and like listen to him tell you about like all the stuff that he had been through and the fact that like he is where he is, and the fact that he's like doing even better than that now and killing it, and he's got a killer job, and he just moved out of his, I don't want to tell his story for him, but he got out of his whole out of AA and everything like that. He was living in a house with a couple other guys. He's in his first like home with his girlfriend and her son, and they're like a whole family together.
So
and
awesome.
Like, it's so cool to see him in that spot. Like, that makes me insanely happy. So Dutch, if you're watching, I love you, dude, and I'm super happy for you, and
Thank
you're killing
Dutch.
it. So
that's Dutch
Dutch Newman. Yeah.
which also who was also
Mario Johnson. Yep, he goes by Dutch Newman.
I literally had people who heard that and were so grateful because they knew Dutch, and
Yeah.
they were just so excited to hear that. And by the way, he and I almost have the same sobriety date.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got 5 years behind me. He's got 5 years behind him now.
Yeah.
And I just saw a post he made. I think one of his brothers.
It's
has
his,
a
I think
year,
it's his younger
just hit
brother.
a year
Just hit
now.
a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude,
So that's pretty cool.
I think talking
And
about
he's
that
a great
stuff
rapper.
is huge. Yeah, he's great. He's super talented. And that was
He was one of the early guys that Tech Nine. Is that right?
Yeah, so he never got signed with Strange, but that was the early entourage of Tech Nine, that he would open for him. They kind of followed him. That was the crowd.
That's cool.
So anybody that has been around or witnessed Kansas City rap hip hop stuff for the last 20 years, he's not that long. He's not an old guy, but he's been doing this for a bit, and he's been around, and everybody knows him. And he's just it's so cool to see him doing well. So, but that one, and then I recalled when Chris Rochelle came on and talked about his story and his struggles and stuff. That was a good one. I just like hearing everybody's stories that come on here and talk about overcoming something crazy that could have ended their life or their career or whatever, and just kind of overcoming that.
Yeah, some of us could be dead multiple times over.
Yeah.
Jeez.
No.
Oh man,
So
that's cool. Well, I would say if I picked a couple of my favorites, one of them was a recent one with John Dominic Crossan.
Yeah.
Now the crazy thing about John Dominic Crossan is he's, regardless of what his faith world is, he's one of the most brilliant historians of the Greco-Roman world, which is the whole world that Jesus was born into, spoke to, ministered to. It's really what all of the New Testament is about. And so the whole biblical history backdrop to the Bible, basically, but especially the Greco-Roman New Testament era, is his specialty. He's one of the world-renowned Greco-Roman historians. And he's 90 years old.
Yeah.
And I just interviewed him at 90. He's just got a new book out called Paul the Pharisee. And I had the honor of interviewing this guy. And by the way, when I was at Baylor University, I was, Southern Baptist, conservative, evangelical. And we thought John Dominic Crossan was like the enemy, he was this liberal, guy. And I didn't read him for years, but then a few years ago, I started reading some of his stuff, and just the history alone is so great. It's really added to my understanding of the New Testament and the backdrop and all that kind of stuff. So that was a big one for me.
No, that was a really good episode.
Interviewing a
too.
dude whose mind is so sharp at 90 and still writing books.
I wouldn't believe he was 90.
And he
when
so much energy. It was just amazing. That was probably a highlight for me. Of course, the people that I've interviewed on open relational process theology, like Tom Orr, Jonathan Foster, Brian McLaren, Tripp Fuller, that whole crowd. I'm going to be doing a lot more interviews with that crowd, and that's been really fun for me. But musician-wise, I would say so Matt is the one that has helped me network with so many musicians, because he's been in the music world in Kansas City for over 2 decades, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not even 40 yet, hardly, but you've been working with musicians in Kansas City for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
Basically started as a teenager.
Yeah.
He's a musician himself, great musician, even songwriter. But he's been doing music videos for people in the rap community and other musicians in Kansas City.
Yeah.
He's been networked with artists and musicians for 2 decades. And so Matt has really been a blessing and helped me get so many great interviews. So I'm thinking of some of our rapper guys, you know, like we already mentioned Dutch, but I loved hanging out with Glenn Robinson, who is the epitome.
Yep.
And he was amazing.
Glenn is fantastic. He is a good, fun person to know.
Yeah, and his food reviews, by the way, are amazing. Yes. So if you want to get him on Instagram or Reels or TikTok, look up The Epitome, or does he go by Glenn?
It's The Epitome. It's all of his social media stuff.
And He does food reviews, which are really fun.
He is the person. So anytime Kristen and I get a date night in Kansas City, I text him and I'm like, "Where should we go to dinner?" Because he always knows the best places. And not only that, but he'll be like, "Try this, this, and this." He's like, "These are the 3 best things to get at this restaurant." Like, he knows what's up with food in Kansas City.
That's so sweet. Yeah, and he grew up right down off of 18th and Vine.
Yep.
He's a great hip hop, rapper guy, but he's just a beautiful human being too.
He is.
So he's great. I'm thinking about Calvin Arsenia.
Yeah.
My friend Tim Place, and this is a shout out to Calvin, but Tim Place is one of my rock climbing buddies, bicycle buddies. Tim's also had, PhD in music at UMKC. And a few years ago, Tim was like, "Hey, you need to meet this Calvin Arsenia." Calvin he calls himself the world's tallest harp player. He's black, about 6'8", and he's gay, and he grew up in the white evangelical church trying to pray the gay away. It didn't work. He finally stopped hating himself and decided that God loved him and he needed to learn to love himself.
Yeah.
And he's a brilliant musician. He can play 10 different instruments. The harp is his main instrument. He's classically trained, but he can go from classical to blues to EDM, electronic dance music. He's become a really dear friend. He runs Greenwood Social Hall now. He's been curating artists and musicians, particularly artists and musicians who have been historically marginalized. So women, people of color, and the queer community are the people that he features there. And Calvin's honestly become one of my closest friends.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful for him. Yeah, those are some of the ones that kind of stand out.
I think you also just have to throw it out there that if you haven't seen Calvin perform live, you have to do that.
Yeah.
Because that's like his voice and like the way he plays his harp and stuff, like it's not like anybody else that I've seen around here anywhere, honestly. Like, he puts on such a killer performance. I really love watching him.
He's a local guy who I keep thinking one of these days he's going to break nationally and the whole world's going to know who he is. But
they will for sure. I don't doubt it.
But at this point, I'm still grateful he's right here in Kansas City and I can go hang with him.
I do have an honorable mention for music because it just popped in my head. I just remember sitting over there at that desk when Jordan and Jake and Brooke were all here, and they played they each picked their own favorite song that they had wrote and played them together. I still go onto the YouTube page and listen to the audio recordings of their session they did here.
They recorded right at this table. I had chills
the entire time. Like, the 3 of them together, they don't perform together that often, but oh my gosh.
We need to repost that one.
Yeah, no, we should for sure.
This is a family who grew up in super conservative Southern Baptist or independent Baptists. They thought Southern Baptists were liberal. They thought Southern Baptists were liberal. And they grew up touring the country doing like Gaither-style gospel music. And kind of the whole family kind of deconstructed out of that super fundamentalism. And they've each gone on to do a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
And so tell me, it's Jordan Taylor.
Jordan Taylor. Jake Wells.
Jake Wells, who was one of the finalists in on The Voice
he was
years
on The Voice.
ago. And then their sister, Brooke Cherith. Yeah. They were amazing.
They're all 3 incredible.
And hearing them harmonize.
Musicians.
Yeah.
No, I sat right there and had chills the entire time. I was just like, oh, man. Yeah, they're good. I had to mention that. I just thought of that one. I was like, that was a pretty great one too. So
we've had so many guests. So when we just pick out a few,
it's hard.
It's not. They're all have been amazing. Yet I got to mention this one too. Out of these 216 episodes, I don't know how many we did with my dad.
We did a lot with your dad, and we should maybe do more of those too, because those were a lot of fun.
So my dad's 89, and he and my mom still listen to most of my podcast episodes, but I did a series with my dad called Stories with Dad.
Yeah.
And the reason I did it is because my dad's a storyteller, and growing up, he was as ornery as can be. And I actually, if you look up the word ornery in the dictionary, it's And it's an old word that most people think it means like, it's like you're irritable, you're trying to bring up an argument, and like you're somebody, it's the kind of person that you wouldn't want to hang around.
Sure.
But in the Midwest, ornery has come to be used as a playful term for people who kind of like to stir up trouble just for fun.
Yeah.
Just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
So that's how I use the word ornery.
Yeah.
And like my dad is about as ornery as they come. And I had all these stories that I've heard my dad tell his whole life. And he's so much, he's just a great conversationalist. He's a loving person. And so I thought, I got to capture some of these stories before he's, not around anymore. Yeah. And so I bet you we did 20.
There's a bunch.
Maybe 20.
I don't know the exact number, but there's several of them.
With my dad. And actually, a couple of them have been in our top 10.
They are.
And they're like just little short 5-minute stories. I think.
The one about him when they left, when he was in the Coast Guard, that one was the one. It was like number 4 or number 5 on the top. But yeah.
Yeah, he's got some funny stories.
Yeah.
And so those have been fun. I think I'm probably going to turn that into a little book and just call it Stories with Dad and get it out there in book form.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what else? What else has stood out to you, Matt? Anything?
There's been a bunch of stuff in the episodes that have stood out. I think, personally, like listening to, like getting introduced to all these people that you've had on here too, has been really cool in my own life, because like through a couple periods in my life, I had kind of tuned out like church, religion, my faith, and everything. I just like kept going through these snowballs of like, it'd get really good and then something crazy would happen and it would just be like, it felt off, and it's just kind of challenged me to kind of like rethink some things. And I don't know, just listening to some people talk, I kind of shifted my mindset from like what I was brought up being taught was like, God gets angry at you, and God, like I was literally taught growing up in church that like I needed to be fearful and like afraid of God, and like I lived my life, like I took that literally as a little kid and was like terrified of it. And then as I became older and had children and everything, and then listened to some of these people talk, I'm like, I can't like in good conscience get behind that. Like as a father, like I can't imagine building a relationship with my children off of fear, And like listening to some of the people that you've had on this podcast has been like big for me on like who I now think God is, has been pretty cool. So that's a personal thing.
Yeah, thank you.
So.
Yeah, I think that the Bible is it's a hard book to read. Like literally, if you sat down and tried to read the Bible straight through. The stories in Genesis and Exodus are pretty easy to read, but then you hit Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, and it just gets. And then if you hit, Joshua and Judges, it gets crazy. There's some crazy gods, or visions of God, or versions of God in the Bible that I think are off base. And it's just like there's lots of characters in the Bible that are crazy, and you wouldn't want to imitate everything they did, but we can learn from their craziness.
Yeah.
I think there's also some crazy ideas about God that aren't who God really is, but that represent a history of how people have thought about God through the years. And I think one of the things is this angry, wrathful God who's going to punish you every time you do something wrong. And honestly, I've been on a lifelong mission to deconstruct that God. Like I said, there's some gods that should die. and the God that I want to love and worship and believe in is an uncontrolling God of love. My favorite new verse is 1 John 4:16, and it says this: God is love. Those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. And if you think about a loving parent, that to me is the most important concept of God that we can hold on to, that holds up through everything. And I think it's a God who is uncontrolling because love is uncontrolling.
Yeah.
See, love does not dominate, does not manipulate, does not coerce, does not abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so love itself means that there's certain things that love won't do. I mean, you've got teenagers now, right?
Yeah.
There's probably times you'd like to lock them up. Not
Yeah.
really. Maybe not. But I mean, like, there's times when you wish you could have more control over them than
for sure.
than you do.
Absolutely.
But you know that love
Yeah.
doesn't. There's limits to how love can control and still be love. Love can become abusive, manipulative, dominating, coercive, and then it's not love anymore. And so I think if we rethink our concepts of God through this idea that God is primarily, most importantly, thoroughly love, then that's how we get to this idea of uncontrolling love. And so that's the only God I want to worship.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like this God who's sending lightning bolts down on people and cursing people. No. God knows you, loves you, will always love you, and his love is unconditional. Her love is unconditional. Its love is, however you want to, whatever pronoun you want to put there with God. God is love. God is spirit, and God infuses everything with love. And so that's what we want to live for. And really that's a big part of Spirituality Adventures is we work with people who are in recovery, who have deconstructed and rethought their faith or left the church. The whole world of the meditation world is really about learning to love ourselves and have self-compassion and to connect with something greater than us that is love, that is caring, that is goodness, beauty, creativity, generosity. Those are the things that I want to worship and press into and be a part of. Well, thanks for being a part of this, Matt.
Yeah. Thanks for having me be a part of it.
Plug Harbor Media Productions for us real quickly as we think about that. If people want to reach out to you for work, how do they get a hold of you? And
sure.
And tell them where you're. Well, you don't have to tell your house location, but where are you guys living at now?
So we moved to Bolivar. So we live still in Missouri. We're kind of like central towards more of the southern part of the state. My kids for a while had been talking about wanting to relocate and move, and we had thrown around the idea, and Kristen, my wife, had mentioned it, and I was just like, I was the one saying no to the whole process. I was like, I don't want to move. I don't want to leave Kansas City. That's not a good call. We shouldn't do it. Like all this stuff. And I was super against it. And I just kept like feeling this like nudge of maybe we should look into it a little bit more. And then this door just opened and a whole bunch of stuff kind of unfolded. And we went for it. And I have watched my kids like do a 180, like all of them. They are plugged in. They are part of like a youth group. They've got really, really great friends. A couple of them were just really dealing with some stuff when we were in Kansas City that kind of came with just being in a bigger city. And I've watched them kick some old habits that were like really starting to form, and I was worried about as a parent and everything, and uncontrolling love of like not trying to be crazy forceful, because I know as from firsthand experience that kind of pushes you away. And I didn't want to do that. But like I've just watched my teenagers especially just like all turn around and like they're like kicking butt right now, and it's really cool to see. So I'm very thankful for that. But yeah, so we moved. I still am in Kansas City quite a bit and do a lot of work up here, and it's a 2-hour drive, so it's not horrible. And I like driving and listening to podcasts, so it works out. But yeah, so I do anything with a camera and anything with a computer pretty much is what I do. That's what I've done since I was in high school. I do a lot of like social media content, media production stuff. And the website is thisisharbor, HARBOR.com. So all my work is on there, contact form, all that kind of fun stuff. So.
And you're still available to do work in
Yeah.
and around the greater Kansas City
Absolutely.
area, even though
Yep.
you live in Bolivar.
Yep.
And then also you can connect, obviously today through Zoom and all the different ways.
Yeah.
So you don't even have to be in the same city anymore to
Yep.
do this kind of work. So.
And depending on like what people's needs are too, I have some people that work with us with Harbor that are like contractors and extra camera people and stuff like that. So if you're needing someone here in town short notice or something like that, like we have people we can send out and stuff. So I'm lucky I've got a team of about 5 people that I really, really trust and I think do a good job, and I like working with them. So
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks for all the work that you've done
Yeah.
here. I was thinking 3 years, but we figured it's almost 4 years.
Yeah.
So almost 4 years. And and we were working together prior to Spirituality Adventures as well.
Mhm.
So I think we've known each other now probably getting close to 15 years, maybe.
I think so, somewhere around.
Somewhere.
I think it's probably like 12 or 13.
12,
I think
13
12,
years.
13 years. Yeah. So
So I appreciate
A
you,
bit.
love your
Yeah,
family.
same.
You're one of my heroes for all that you do and
yeah,
for your parenting, and love your family so much.
thanks.
So
Me too.
well, thanks everybody for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. And this was just kind of a way to kind of catch you up to speed with what's been going on the last 2 or 3 months with Spirituality Adventures. If you've noticed that we hadn't got the podcast out as regularly as normal, this gives you a little insight into what's been going on. And by the way, we're so grateful for the people who do support us financially. We have a small group of people who support Spirituality Adventures. We did studies on this. They've done studies on this. Only about 1% of the people who consume social media content actually support it financially.
Mm-hmm.
So that 1% is really, really important. And we would love to see that go to 2, 3, 4, 5%, 6%. We'd love to see that grow. One of the best ways you can do is support us monthly. You can go to spiritualityadventures.com and just sign up for a monthly support. You'll get it's tax deductible because we're a nonprofit, but you'll also get bonus content. We do bonus commentaries on the blog. We do bonus interviews on our podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
We'll sometimes have music release, bonus content. And so, check that out. Become a part of the support team. And then the other thing to do, if you haven't subscribed to our audio, YouTube, all of our platforms, subscribe.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a simple thing. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes less than 15 seconds. But subscribe to our podcast. Do it. Subscribe on YouTube and on your audio platform.
Yeah. I will say too that with this episode, if you're listening on like podcasts or Apple, or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go to the YouTube page to watch this episode, and then all of the episodes that we mentioned earlier, I'll throw up the links like cards while we're mentioning them. The link to that
cool.
video will pop up on screen so they can navigate to all the episodes that we're chatting about too and save
Perfect.
those. So definitely subscribe to the YouTube page. That would be
Excellent.
a good way to go back and watch all this stuff.
And then anytime you read a blog or hear a podcast or watch a podcast on YouTube, share it.
Mm-hmm.
Share it, because that really helps us out when people share the things that they like. If you don't like it, just say, all right, I'll wait for the next one. But no, but if you like it, share it, get it out there, help us spread the word. Thanks so much for tuning in, listening. And thanks for all of you who support Spirituality Adventures as well, and all the Spirituality Adventures in all the ways that we just mentioned. So thank you, Matt. Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments. And go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.